Thank you for joining us on our Zips football postgame podcast. I'm Ben Jeanette alongside Spencer Spin Davies. Spence, 31-6 is today's final. Zips over Eastern Michigan. My prediction, almost. I had 33-3, 31-6. I'll take it.
Absolutely. I had 45-3. They had a couple opportunities that they couldn't capitalize on in the red zone, so I'll say mine was kind of close as well.
You know, the Zips started out the game kind of slow that first half. You know, Eastern Michigan scored first with a touchdown, missed the extra point. Do you think that first half there was still a little bit of that Pittsburgh Power 5 conference win hangover?
They had that hangover for sure. They were overlooking an Eastern Michigan team that was hungry because they've been getting blown out week by week. So they were coming into Akron wanting to get an upset, and they showed it a bit in the first half.
You know, the dominant rushing game of Connor Hunley that we saw last week wasn't present today. On the other hand, the passing game was huge for the Zips. You know, Kyle Poole had an absolute great game, 326 yards, 2 touchdowns. He went 27 of 40. You know, Connor Hunley was their leading rusher with 61 yards today on 8 carries. He did have a long touchdown that went 28 yards, but the story of today was Kyle Poole and how he was able to sling the ball around.
Absolutely. Now, Terry Bowden ended up throwing the ball a lot more than we had expected because in the first half, Connor Hunley only had 2 rushes, and the Zips only rushed the ball 7 times in the first half. They ended up rushing for 31 by the time the game ended. But they didn't use that rushing attack. They instead went to Kyle Poole, gave the ball to him in his hands, and he connected a lot, and especially to L.T. Smith, who had 10 receptions for 117 yards and a touchdown.
L.T. Smith was huge, and then, you know, that security blanket of Kyle Poole, Zach DeRazio, still without a touchdown, but came away with 8 receptions of 87 yards.
The sure-handed receiver. He's been here for a while, and those two are very comfortable with each other.
On the defensive side, Spencer, do you want to talk about the big name that was just going all over the place on defense today?
Absolutely. Jatavis Brown, what a game. 14 tackles, 2 assisted, 12 unassisted. He had 2 sacks and 2 tackles for loss.
Yeah, he was absolutely a big-time presence out there on the field today for the Zips defense, you know, causing havoc in the backfield, making tackles all over the place. They absolutely needed him. But my play of the game, what I really loved was that punt that went 60-plus yards to pin Eastern Michigan at the 1. Although they were able to escape out of that situation, tell you what, the Zips have a great punter on their hands because he was making punts last week at Pittsburgh that were just phenomenal.
That definitely gives you an edge. Zach Paul ended up punting 64 yards. It was a roll that ended up at the 1-yard line, and the Zips finally took advantage of a great punt and downed him in their own territory in their end zone. And then Rod Bolden ended up throwing an interception, which could have led to another scoring opportunity. The Zips only got a field goal going into half. But if that was a touchdown, say, against a better opponent, that could be a huge thing for the Zips.
No, a couple problems I did notice with the Zips today, something that they have to work on is their special teams was not performing at its best besides the punter. 1 return today, no yards.
Amani Davis only had 1 catch, and it didn't go for anything. He actually almost fumbled. He did fumble it, but he didn't recover it, and he recovered it. But Amani was very indecisive today. He had a couple go over his head and got the Zips pinned back even more. He's got to end up at least having the ability to fair catch and have confidence. That's his biggest issue so far this season.
Yeah, you know, they need more yards out of their punt returns. It was very indecisive, you know, letting the ball roll and roll and roll the way they did sometimes, giving them bad field position. And, you know, up until the second half, the offense was not clicking in that first half at all, making a ton of mistakes. You know, Kyle Poole, very indecisive throwing the ball the first half. I'm not a big fan of the way he rolls out of the pocket way too early when he should be stepping up in the pocket and throwing the ball downfield.
Yes, the stats obviously show that he had a fantastic game, and I'm not taking anything away from him, but another thing I noticed is that he's throwing from his back foot when he rolls out, and that could lead to interceptions in the future if he's not careful about it. Now, something I did see in the game that I liked was Juwan Chisholm. He had 6 carries for 45 yards, averaged 7.5 a pop. He looked pretty good today. He looked a lot more healthy, and I feel like Terry Bowden's going to go with this committee approach with him and Hunley from now on.
They do have to clean up some things on both sides of the ball. They had 15 penalties today for 124 yards. based on your opponent, you can get away with that. But going into MAC play, you go up against teams like Bowling Green, you're not going to get away with 15 penalties and giving up 124 yards without giving them some points.
Yes, you have to be mentally prepared. You cannot have these false start penalties that could happen at a crucial time in the game.
We saw Tommy Woodson get in there a little bit today for Kyle Pohl, and we saw that last week at Pitt. Not sure why, and this was even before junk time. This was during crucial parts of the game that we saw Tommy Woodson in there, and maybe it's something that they're just doing is switching quarterbacks in and out at crucial points in games.
I think they're doing it to keep Kyle Pohl healthy throughout the season, and they have a very, very valuable backup in Tommy Woodson. As you can see, in the air he's not that great, but his biggest threat is when he runs that dual threat read option and he gets to go for a long game. Like today, he ended up having 6 rushes for 60 yards, and his long run was 40 yards up the middle.
Exactly. With the Zips on the defense, they did an absolute great job today, not letting Eastern Michigan gain momentum after they scored first. And, I thought Jartavis Brown talked in his press conference about how he was able to get these guys going and saying, look, this game's not over. We gave up that one touchdown. Let's shut them out.
Another unsung hero of the defense with Brown was Nordley Cappy. He only had 4 tackles, but 3 of those tackles were for loss, and 1 was a sack.
Yeah, Nordley was very crucial in that game today. And you know what? I really loved how they were able to get over that hump. They came in looking like they had a hangover from last week, but they able to overcome that, go out there, have a dominating 31-6 performance.
They got off their high horse and they focused. And that's exactly what they're going to need to do the rest of the season. Even with Miami of Ohio coming in next week, they're going to have to stay focused no matter what your opponent is like. Keep the same game. Do not play down to your competition.
Exactly. Defensively, they only gave up 94 yards on 37 rushes. That is absolutely phenomenal as a team defense. And, their punt return yards, Eastern Michigan had 2 punts, 51-yard returns. Not bad either. So where do you see the Zips team going forward into their next game?
I think with Miami of Ohio, they're a little bit better than Eastern Michigan, but they're still not the same Miami of Ohio that you saw with Zach Dysert. I see the Zips winning again next week. I do. I think they're going to ride this momentum in. They're going to be bowling this year.
I think so. For Spencer Spin Davies, I'm Ben Jeanette. This has been your Zips Football Postgame Podcast.